Have you ever wondered how the meat on a cellar shelf makes it through to spring? Not frozen, not sealed in plastic, just sitting in jars on a cold stone shelf, each lid marked with a pencil date, the oldest one always at the front. Early December in Lancaster County. A woman in her 60s carries 2 jars down, sets them at the back, and pulls the oldest 2 forward. Upstairs, no chest freezer. Never has been. Every piece of meat in that house has an address and a deadline. Now here's the part most people get wrong. They hear no freezer and picture a family going without. Many Amish households run propane-powered refrigerators and gas-cooled storage. No freezer means no power cord between their food and the wall. No single appliance that, if it quits on a Wednesday night, takes the whole supply with it. Amish communities now live in more than 30 states. This is not a novelty. It is a system, and most of it costs nothing. 9 rules. The first 3 need no cellar, no smokehouse, and no land. They work on one shelf in an ordinary kitchen, starting this Saturday. The first one takes 4 seconds and a pencil. 1. Date everything. 4 seconds that keep a shelf honest. Stand in that cellar in December and look at the jars. Every lid carries a pencil mark. Month, year, and what is inside, written by the hand that sealed it. No mysteries, no guessing. No jar that sits in the back for 2 years because nobody remembers what it is or when it got there. Now open your own refrigerator. Look at the foil-wrapped thing on the second shelf. You put it there, you're not sure when. You're not sure what it is. And if you're honest, you're probably not going to eat it. That is the gap this rule closes. 1 pencil mark and the question goes away. The jar tells you everything you need to know before you even pick it up. You don't need a cellar for this. You need a marker and 10 seconds every time you put something in the fridge. Date it, label it. Let the shelf talk to you instead of the other way around. That was 1, and here's the thing about that pencil mark. It only works if what happens next is just as automatic. 2. Oldest out first. The rule that keeps a shelf from lying to you. March in an ordinary kitchen. A woman pulls the oldest jar to the front and slides everything else back. New goes behind. Always. Not sometimes. Not when she remembers. The shelf runs like a line at the post office, and cutting is not allowed. Now picture your own groceries. You come home, you put the new bag on top of last week's bag, and the chicken from 9 days ago sinks to the bottom of the drawer. You find it Thursday. It smells wrong. It goes in the trash. 1/3 of the food in American households ends up there. That is not a character flaw. It is a shelf with no system. First in, first out. The oldest thing is always the next thing used. You could do this in your refrigerator this afternoon, and the only cost is 3 minutes of moving things around. So 2 rules in, and nothing has spoiled yet. But rotation only works if there is nothing left on the shelf to rot. And that brings us to the part most modern kitchens skip entirely. 3. Use every scrap before sundown. A November afternoon, and the kitchen table looks like a workbench. Bones from the morning's cut are already in the pot, simmering down into stock. Fat sits in a pan on the stove, renderingly, headed for a jar of its own. Organ meat gets cooked or canned the same day. What the chickens will eat goes out to the yard. What is left, the actual waste, fits in the palm of one hand. Meanwhile, most of us buy a boneless, skinless chicken breast in a foam tray and throw away the very parts that make the richest food, the bones that turn into stock, the fat that makes a pan worth using. You don't need a flock of chickens for this. Next time you roast a chicken, save the bones. Put them in a pot with water and an onion. Simmer for a few hours, strain it, and you have stock that costs $6 at the store. Refrigerate or freeze it the same day. And here's the rule underneath that rule. Nothing in that kitchen waited. Not one bone sat overnight. Not one jar of fat cooled on the counter until someone got around to it. Which brings us to the clock that runs the whole system. 4. Nothing waits. 4 in the morning, July, and the work has already started. Butchering day in many Amish households moves like a factory floor, except the factory is a barn and everyone in the family has a station. Meat goes from the animal to the cutting board to the canner in hours. Not days. Not, "I'll deal with it tomorrow." Hours. The speed is not about efficiency for its own sake. It is about safety. Meat that sits is meat that spoils. Every hour between the cut and the seal is an hour bacteria get to work. And in these households, the processing follows tested methods from the USDA and state extension services, available to anyone with a library card or an internet connection. Think about your own kitchen. You buy meat on Sunday. It goes in the fridge. By Wednesday, it is still there, still waiting for a plan. That gap between buying and deciding is where most waste happens. Next time you bring meat home, decide what it becomes before it goes in the fridge. Cook it, freeze it, or plan the meal. Just don't let it sit and hope. That was 4. Now the next one is the rule that catches the most people off guard, because they think they already know what it means. 5. Smoke is flavor, not a finish line. Step behind a farmhouse in late October. A small, 8 feet square, the door left unsealed on purpose. Open it, and the smell hits you. Applewood, hickory, a sweetness in the back of your throat. Hams hang from hooks. The smoke curls through everything, and has been curling for days, but that smoke is not what keeps the meat safe. Before anything entered that smokehouse, it went through a full curing process, salt and curing compounds, applied by a tested recipe, not by feel. The smoke adds flavor and color. The preservation happened before the first match was struck. If smoked sausage at the grocery store still says keep refrigerated, now you know why. Smoking alone does not make meat safe for room temperature storage. The cure does the heavy lifting. Anyone working with cured meats at home should follow tested guidelines from the USDA or their state extension service. Every time. Now here's where the whole system shifts. Everything so far has been a habit or a tool, something you do when the meat is in front of you. But the next rule happens months before any of that, and it might be the most important one on the list. 6 of these rules lived in a pencil, a clock, or a notebook. The last 3 live in a jar, a crock, and a conversation. But first, the notebook. 6. The notebook in July. Late June, the sun still up at 8, and the woman from that cellar sits at a kitchen table with a composition notebook open in front of her. No recipes on this page. Just columns. How many jars of canned beef? How many pounds for the smokehouse? What gets turned into sausage? What gets shared with the neighbor whose husband passed in the spring? Every cut from every animal has a line, and every line has a destination. This is where the addresses and deadlines from that December cellar were born. Not in October, when the work happened. In June, when the thinking happened. Most of us buy meat the way we buy gas. The tank is low, so we stop. No plan, no count, no idea what we already have at home. We stand in the store and decide on the spot, and half the time we buy what we bought last week, because we forgot it was still in the freezer. And this is the rule that separates a household that preserves meat from a household that just stores it. The preservation does not start when the lid seals. It starts when somebody decides in June what January is going to look like. You don't need livestock for this. You need a piece of paper and 20 minutes. Before your next grocery trip, open the fridge, open the freezer, and write down what you have. Then plan meals from what is already there before you buy anything new. That is the notebook. That is the whole trick. 7. Pressure can buy the book. September morning, and the kitchen sounds like a machine shop. A pressure canner on the stove, the weight rocking in a rhythm, steam hissing through the vent. This is the backbone. For meat and any low-acid food, a water bath canner is not enough. The temperature never climbs high enough. Only a pressure canner reaches what is needed, and the times and pressures come from tested guidelines published by the USDA and updated by state extension services. Follow them exactly, no shortcuts. A couple in their 60s works this kitchen like a relay team. One fills, one wipes the rims, one loads the canner. By afternoon, the jars sit on the counter, and one by one they tick. That sound, the seal pulling tight as the jar cools, is the sound of a shelf that will hold. If you have a pressure canner sitting in a closet, pull it out, check the gasket, look up your state extension service, and download their current canning guide. That is your Saturday. When was the last time you checked the date on something in the back of your freezer? That thought leads straight to number 8. 8. Salt by recipe, never by feel. January. A workspace near the cellar, cold enough that your breath shows. A scale sits on the table, and next to it a bag of curing salt, the kind with the pink tint that tells you it is not table salt. A man measures it by weight, not by handfuls, not by what his grandfather did from memory. Salt curing is not instinct, it is chemistry. Too little and the meat is not safe. Too much and it is not edible. The difference is a kitchen scale and a reliable source. Most of us salt food by shaking until it looks right. The salt in this crock does something else entirely. It pulls moisture out, changes the environment so spoilage cannot take hold. But only if the ratio is correct. Here is the one thing worth remembering. A chest freezer runs on a power cord. A properly cured ham in a cold cellar does not care what the power company is doing. That is not nostalgia. That is engineering. If you are interested in curing at home, start with your state extension service. They publish tested recipes with exact measurements. Follow the numbers. That was 8. And the last one is not a method at all. It is a conversation that happens before any of the methods start. 9. The whole animal has a map. Early December, the same farmhouse, the same table. Tonight the seats are full. A family sits around a hand-drawn diagram. Hams go to the cure, shoulders get canned, ribs smoke over apple wood, bones go straight into the pot, fat renders before sundown. The hide goes to a neighbor who works leather. Nothing on that diagram says, "Figure it out later." The woman from the cellar sits at the far end of the table. She has heard this conversation 40 times. She does not say much. Everyone in that room already knows where everything goes because someone drew the map before the work began. Most of us buy meat one cut at a time, one part of one animal, sealed in plastic, disconnected from everything it came from. No plan for what happens to it beyond dinner this week maybe. That is not a failing. It is what happens when the map disappears. You do not need to raise your own animals to use this rule. Next time you buy a whole chicken, sit down for 2 minutes and decide. Breast meat for Tuesday, thighs for Thursday, bones into stock, fat into the pan. Every part gets a line. They don't waste less because they try harder. They waste less because every piece had a name before the work started. 9 rules. A pencil on the lid. The oldest jar forward. Every bone back in the pot. Nothing sitting overnight. A smokehouse that finishes what a cure started. A notebook opened months before the first jar sealed. A canner with the weight rocking steady. Salt measured on a scale. And a map drawn before the animal is touched. None of this runs on willpower. It runs on a house organized so that the right thing is also the easy thing. That is the real answer, and it is portable. Remember that cellar, the cold steps, the jars catching light from the door above. You know now why the pencil came out first. It was never a secret. It was Tuesday. You don't need a farm, a barn, a horse, or anyone's religion. You don't need all 9. Pick one. Start this weekend with whatever you already have. One shelf, one marker, and the decision to stop letting food sit without a plan. Which one of these 9 did somebody in your family do without ever calling it a rule? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. If one of these made you think of someone, send them this video. If it was worth your time, the like button tells me to make more. Next time we are stepping into the workshop, where the tools have outlived 2 owners, and nothing gets replaced until it can't be fixed. If you want that one to find you, subscribe. The cellar is quiet now, pencil dates facing out, the oldest jar at the front, and upstairs, a notebook lies closed on a kitchen table, every line filled in. Not because somebody tried harder, because somebody planned it in July.